Commander Zeth Kalar of the Zelthran Empire straightened his forearms and dismissed the holographic display with a gesture that conveyed both authority and disgust. The blue-skinned alien's crystalline eyes reflected the dying light of a distant star as he turned to address the assembled War Council. Representatives from 3 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations sat around the obsidian table, their various forms of alien physiology creating a rainbow of colors and shapes in the dim chamber. "The human resistance continues to weaken," Zeth Kalar announced, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked his species' natural authority. "Our combined forces have successfully contained them to their final stronghold on Earth. Intelligence reports suggest they have perhaps 3 solar cycles before complete capitulation." General Morthak of the Korvac Federation leaned forward, his insectoid mandibles clicking in what passed for agreement among his kind. The towering creature's compound eyes shimmered as he accessed his tactical implants. "The humans fight with desperation, but desperation alone cannot overcome superior technology in numbers. Our analysis indicates their morale remains artificially high due to their persistent belief in what they call legends and heroes from their past." A sound that resembled grinding metal emanated from the 3rd member of the council. Ancient Vorthas of the Vorthak Collective had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations across the eons. Her form, a shifting mass of metallic tendrils housed within a containment field, pulsed with sardonic amusement. These humans cling to primitive stories as if narrative fiction could alter the fundamental laws of physics and warfare. Most amusing. The War Council chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the massive space station's life support systems. Outside the reinforced windows, the combined armada of 3 galactic empires stretched as far as the eye could see. Millions of vessels of every conceivable design floated in perfect formation, their weapons trained on the small blue planet below that stubbornly refused to surrender. Earth hung in space like a jewel, its surface scarred by orbital bombardments but somehow still maintaining its defiant spin. Cloud formations swirled across continents where human cities continued to broadcast signals of resistance. The sight should have filled the alien commanders with satisfaction, yet something about humanity's refusal to accept defeat had begun to unsettle even the most veteran military minds. Zeth Kalar activated another hologram, this one showing intercepted human communications. The translation scrolled across the display in multiple alien languages, each one cataloging the strange references that seemed to dominate human military chatter. "Listen to this," the Zelthran commander said, highlighting a recent transmission. "Human resistance leader Sarah Chen to all units. Remember the Alamo? Remember Thermopylae? Remember the stories our grandparents told us about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Today, we write our own legend. These humans speak as if historical accounts of previous defeats could somehow influence the outcome of current battles." General Morthak's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of agitation among his species. "Our psychological warfare specialists have analyzed these references extensively. The humans appear to draw strength from tales of hopeless last stands and impossible victories. They reference events from their own history, fictional characters from their entertainment media, and even stories that appear to be entirely mythological in nature. The most peculiar aspect," Vorthas interjected, her metallic voice carrying the weight of eons, "is their consistent belief that individual actions can alter the course of massive conflicts. They tell stories of single warriors defeating entire armies, of ordinary citizens accomplishing feats that defy probability and logic. It is a persistent delusion that seems endemic to their species." The 3 commanders shared what passed for laughter among their respective species. The idea that primitive human storytelling could pose any threat to their combined military might seemed absurd beyond measure. Their fleets had conquered star systems spanning half the galaxy. Their weapons could crack planets and their warriors had been bred for war across countless generations. Yet as they laughed, none of them noticed the small blinking indicator on the communications console that showed someone was listening to their conversation. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a bunker complex that had somehow survived 3 months of orbital bombardment, Colonel Marcus Reed disconnected from the alien communication frequency he had been monitoring. The scarred human's face bore the marks of countless battles, and his gray eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen the impossible happen more than once. Around him, the remnants of Earth's greatest military minds worked frantically at control stations that flickered with dying power. The underground command center had become humanity's last stronghold, housing not just military personnel but also historians, storytellers, artists, and librarians. In humanity's darkest hour, they had learned that stories might be more important than weapons. "What did you hear, Marcus?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the mission's chief xenopsychologist. Her dark hair was streaked with gray from the stress of recent months, but her eyes still sparkled with the curiosity that had made her Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. Marcus smiled grimly as he replayed the alien conversation through the bunker speakers. The assembled humans listened in silence as their enemies discussed their imminent defeat with casual dismissal. When the recording finished, the bunker remained quiet for several long moments. "They think our stories are just entertainment," said Thomas Wright, Earth's former poet laureate who had volunteered for military service when the invasion began. His weathered hands gripped a tablet containing thousands of years of human literature and legend. "They don't understand that our myths aren't just stories we tell. They're blueprints for who we become when everything is on the line." Captain Sarah Chen, the resistance leader mentioned in the alien intercepts, stood near a tactical display showing the positions of Earth's remaining defensive forces. Her uniform bore the insignia of a dozen different military organizations that had united under her leadership. "The aliens are right about one thing," she said quietly. "We are going to lose this war through conventional means. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time." "But they're wrong about our stories," Marcus said, his voice carrying a certainty that seemed to fill the bunker with new energy. "They think myths are lies. They don't understand that myths are truths waiting for the right moment to manifest." Vasquez leaned forward with interest. Throughout the war, she had been studying the fundamental differences between human and alien psychology. "Explain what you mean, Marcus." The colonel walked to a display showing Earth's history, images cycling through humanity's greatest moments of triumph and tragedy. "Every culture in our history has told stories about heroes who faced impossible odds and found a way to win. David and Goliath. Perseus and the Medusa. Arthur drawing the sword from the stone. Luke Skywalker destroying the Death Star." "Those are just stories," protested Lieutenant Kim Park, one of the younger officers who had never fully embraced what she considered the leadership's increasing reliance on mythology. "Are they," Marcus challenged, "or are they instructions? Templates for how ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when the situation demands it." Thomas Wright stood up, his poet's voice carrying clearly through the bunker. "Every story we've ever told about heroes contains the same basic truth, that courage, determination, and willingness to sacrifice can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The aliens laugh at our stories because they've forgotten how to believe in anything greater than tactical superiority and technological advantage." "But belief doesn't stop plasma cannons," Lieutenant Park pointed out. "Doesn't it?" Marcus asked. He gestured to the tactical display showing their current situation. 3 months ago, the aliens said we would fall in 3 days. 2 months ago, they revised their estimate to 3 weeks. Last month, 3 cycles. Every time they think they have us beaten, we find a way to keep fighting." Captain Chen nodded slowly. "The myths aren't just stories. They're proof of concept. Evidence that humans have always found ways to do the impossible when survival was at stake." Dr. Vasquez began accessing files on her workstation. "The psychological profiles we've developed on our enemies show a fascinating pattern. All 3 alien species have evolved beyond individual heroism. They rely on collective action, superior technology, and overwhelming force. The concept of a single person changing the course of history is literally incomprehensible to them." "Which means," Marcus said, his eyes beginning to shine with a dangerous light, "they have no defense against it." The bunker fell silent again as the implications of that statement sank in. Outside, alien fleets continued their bombardment of Earth's surface. In space, massive weapons charged for what the enemy intended to be the final assault. But deep underground, surrounded by the collected stories and dreams of human civilization, something new was beginning to form. "What are you thinking, Marcus?" Sarah Chen asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Marcus Reed smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a smile that carried genuine hope. "I'm thinking it's time to prove that some myths are true. I'm thinking it's time to show our alien friends what happens when a human stops believing in defeat and starts believing in legend." The lights in the bunker flickered as another wave of orbital bombardment shook the earth above them, but the people gathered around Marcus Reed no longer seemed to notice the attacks. They were too busy listening to a plan that sounded absolutely impossible, which, as every human in the bunker knew, was exactly the kind of plan that their ancestors had always used to win wars that couldn't be won. The war was about to change. The aliens just didn't know it yet. Above them, alien commanders continued their casual conversation about humanity's imminent defeat, never suspecting that they were about to encounter something their sophisticated military doctrines had no provisions for, a human being who had decided to become the hero that every human story had always promised was possible. The mythology was about to become real. The plan that Marcus Reed outlined in the depths of Earth's last bunker would have seemed like madness to any rational military strategist. It relied not on superior firepower or tactical advantage, but on something the aliens had consistently dismissed as primitive superstition, the power of human storytelling to reshape reality itself. "We're going to give them exactly what they expect," Marcus explained to the assembled team of soldiers, scientists, and storytellers who had volunteered for what everyone understood might be humanity's final gambit. A single human warrior, armed with primitive weapons, charging directly into their most heavily defended position. Lieutenant Park stared at the holographic display showing the alien fleet's command structure. 3 massive motherships hung in synchronous orbit above Earth, each one protected by layers of energy shields and defended by thousands of smaller vessels. "That's suicide, sir. Even if we could get past their outer defenses, their flagship vessels have defensive systems that could vaporize anything we could possibly send against them." "That's exactly what they're counting on," Dr. Vasquez said, her fingers dancing across her workstation as she pulled up psychological profiles of the alien commanders. "For the past 3 months, we've been fighting exactly the way they expected us to fight, using conventional tactics, relying on technology, fighting like a civilized military force. But human myths don't follow the rules of conventional warfare." Thomas Wright stood near a wall display showing images from human mythology and literature. Gods, heroes, and legends stared back from paintings, sculptures, and book covers that represented thousands of years of human imagination. Every culture on Earth has stories about the hero's journey. The pattern is always the same. An ordinary person accepts an impossible challenge, faces overwhelming odds, and through courage and sacrifice achieves victory that defies all logical probability. "But those are stories," protested Dr. Rahman, the team's chief physicist. "Fictional narratives created for entertainment and moral instruction. They don't actually change the laws of physics or military science." Marcus walked to the display and touched the image of a simple sword embedded in stone. "Every story we've ever told about heroes contains the same fundamental truth, that human will, properly focused and absolutely committed, can accomplish things that seem impossible. The aliens laugh at our myths because they think stories are separate from reality. But what if they're not?" The bunker's main screen flickered to life, showing intercepted alien communications from the past several hours. Translation programs converted the various alien languages into readable text, displaying the casual confidence with which their enemies discussed humanity's final defeat. "Zelthran High Command reports human resistance decreasing by 12% this cycle," Sarah Chen read aloud. "Korvac tactical analysis suggests complete capitulation within 48 Earth hours. Warthak's psychological assessment concludes that human morale will collapse entirely once they realize their heroic legends cannot alter tactical reality. They're so certain that individual action cannot affect the outcome of large-scale conflicts," Dr. Vasquez observed. "Their entire military philosophy is based on collective force and technological superiority. The idea that one person could change the course of this war is literally outside their conceptual framework." Marcus activated a new display showing Earth's remaining military assets. The numbers were sobering. A few dozen fighters, scattered ground installations running on backup power, and approximately 10,000 soldiers spread across 6 continents. Against them stood alien forces that numbered in the millions. "In every human myth about impossible victories, the hero succeeds not through superior force, but through understanding something the enemy cannot comprehend," Thomas Wright said. "David defeats Goliath not because he's stronger, but because he thinks differently about the nature of the battle." "What are you suggesting?" asked Captain Martinez, one of Sarah Chen's most trusted field commanders. The veteran soldier had survived 3 major engagements with alien forces and understood better than most how overwhelming their technological advantage was. Marcus turned to face the assembled group, his expression carrying the certainty that seemed to infect everyone present. "I'm suggesting that we stop fighting their war and start fighting ours. We're going to launch a single-person assault on their command ship. One human, armed with weapons our ancestors would recognize, carrying nothing but Earth's collected stories and the absolute belief that individual heroism can change the course of history." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant rumble of continued orbital bombardment. Everyone in the bunker understood the implications of what Marcus was proposing. It wasn't just a military strategy, it was an attempt to make human mythology manifest in physical reality. "The targeting systems alone would destroy any craft we could send," Lieutenant Park pointed out. "Their defensive networks are designed to neutralize threats long before they reach the primary vessels." "Unless the threat doesn't register as a threat," Dr. Vasquez said slowly, her eyes beginning to light up with understanding. Marcus, you're not planning to attack them with conventional weapons, are you? Marcus smiled grimly. The aliens have studied our military capabilities extensively. They know our weapons, our tactics, our technology, but they've completely ignored our stories. What if we used weapons that exist in human mythology but have no logical place on the modern battlefield? Thomas Wright began accessing files on his tablet, pulling up images of legendary weapons from across human culture. Excalibur, Mjolnir, the bow of Odysseus, the sword of Roland. Each image seemed to pulse with significance in the dim light of the bunker. You're talking about psychological warfare on a scale they've never encountered, Sarah Chen said, using the power of human belief and storytelling as actual weapons. More than that, Marcus replied. I'm talking about proving that our myths were never just stories. They were templates for possibility, instructions for how ordinary humans can become legendary heroes when survival demands it. Dr. Raymond shook his head. Even assuming the psychological impact would be significant, you'd still need to actually reach their command ship. The physical laws of space combat don't change just because you're carrying a mythological sword. Don't they? Marcus asked. He gestured to the wall displays showing Earth's impossible resistance over the past 3 months. 3 galactic empires with technology beyond our understanding have been trying to conquer one small planet. By every logical calculation, we should have fallen in days. Yet here we are. What makes you think this will be any different? Lieutenant Park challenged. Marcus activated one final display, showing a detailed analysis of alien command structures and decision-making processes. Because for the past 3 months we've been fighting to survive. Now we're going to fight to win. And the difference between those two mindsets is the difference between tactics and legend. The plan that emerged over the next several hours was unlike anything in military history. Marcus would pilot a small craft loaded not with conventional weapons, but with artifacts from human culture. A sword forged by Earth's greatest smiths, armor that bore symbols from every human mythology, and most importantly, a data core containing every heroic story humanity had ever told. The aliens will see exactly what they expect to see, Doctor. Vasquez explained as she worked on the psychological components of the mission. A primitive human making a desperate final attack with obsolete weapons. Their defensive systems won't even register the real threat. Which is, asked Captain Martinez, the moment when human mythology becomes indistinguishable from reality, Thomas Wright answered. When the story becomes so powerful that it overwrites their logical calculations about what should be possible. The weapons themselves were being crafted in the bunker's workshop by artisans who had fled underground when the invasion began. Master swordsmiths, armor makers, and craftsmen who typically created historical replicas for museums were now forging weapons intended for actual combat against enemies from across the galaxy. The sword needs to be more than just functional, explained Elena Rodriguez, the lead craftsperson. It needs to carry the weight of every story humans have ever told about legendary blades. The aluminum-titanium alloy will give it strength, but the symbols etched into the blade will give it power. Marcus watched as Elena carefully inscribed ancient runes alongside modern equations, creating a weapon that bridged the gap between humanity's mythic past and its technological present. The blade seemed to shimmer with significance, as if it was already becoming something more than mere metal. You understand this is likely a one-way mission, Sarah Chen said quietly as Marcus tested the weapon's balance. Every heroic myth involves sacrifice, Marcus replied. The hero always faces the possibility of death in service of something greater than themselves. That's what makes them heroes, instead of just successful soldiers. The alien fleets continued their bombardment above, completely unaware that deep beneath Earth's surface something unprecedented was taking shape. Human creativity, determination, and storytelling tradition were combining into a weapon that their sophisticated tactical computers had no programming to recognize or counter. How long until you're ready, Dr. Vasquez asked. Marcus looked around the bunker at the faces of Earth's last defenders. Soldiers and civilians, artists and scientists, young and old, all united by their shared belief that individual heroism could still matter in an age of galactic warfare. Give me 6 hours to prepare, he said. Then we're going to remind the universe why humans tell stories about heroes who do impossible things. As if in response to his words, the bombardment above intensified. The alien commanders were apparently growing impatient with humanity's continued resistance. They had no way of knowing that their impatience was about to encounter something their million-year-old civilizations had long forgotten, the power of a single individual who absolutely believed in the possibility of victory against impossible odds. The mythology was about to meet the enemy. 6 hours later, Marcus Reed stood in the launch bay of humanity's last operational spaceport, wearing armor that told the story of human civilization. The suit had been crafted not just for protection, but as a living narrative written in metal and composite materials. Celtic knots intertwined with Japanese family crests, Egyptian hieroglyphs shared space with Norse runes, and mathematical equations from Newton and Einstein bordered symbols that predated written history. The spacecraft beside him was equally unconventional. The engineers had stripped away every piece of advanced weaponry and defensive system, replacing them with items that had no logical place on a modern warship. A collection of Earth's greatest literary works, musical instruments from every human culture, paintings and sculptures that captured humanity's greatest artistic achievements, and weapons forged in the style of legendary heroes. "Final systems check complete," reported Chief Engineer Kowalski, her voice carrying a mixture of pride and bewilderment at what they had created. "I've been building spacecraft for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. The power readings don't make sense. The mass distribution should make it impossible to fly, and half the equipment aboard has no identifiable military function." "But does it work?" Marcus asked, running his hand along the sword at his side. The blade seemed to hum with potential energy, as if the stories carved into its surface were eager to become real. "That's the strangest part," Kowalski replied. "According to every law of physics and engineering I know, this ship shouldn't be able to achieve orbital velocity, much less survive combat with alien technology. But the test flights suggest it will perform exactly as designed." Dr. Vasquez approached with a tablet showing the latest psychological profiles of their alien enemies. "I've been analyzing their communications during our preparation time. They're completely focused on conventional threats. Their defensive systems are programmed to respond to energy weapons, explosive devices, and technological warfare. They have no protocols for dealing with what you're about to do." "Because what I'm about to do has never been attempted before," Marcus said. He looked around the launch bay at the faces of everyone who had contributed to this moment. Engineers, artists, soldiers, scientists, and storytellers had all played a part in creating something that existed at the intersection of mythology and technology. Thomas Wright held a leather-bound volume containing Earth's greatest heroic stories. From Gilgamesh to modern space opera, every culture that has ever existed has told stories about this moment, he said. The individual hero, standing against overwhelming darkness, armed with nothing but courage and the belief that right can triumph over might. "The aliens think our stories are primitive fiction because they've never experienced the reality those stories describe," Sarah Chen added. "They've built civilizations based on collective action and technological superiority. The idea that individual will can reshape reality itself is completely outside their understanding." Marcus climbed into the pilot's seat of the small craft, feeling the weight of human history settling around him like a cloak. The control systems had been simplified to their most basic functions, leaving more space for the artifacts and stories that were the mission's real weapons. "Communication link established with the command bunker," announced Lieutenant Park from the mission control station. We'll be monitoring the entire flight and recording everything for transmission to other human settlements throughout the galaxy. Win or lose, the story gets told," Marcus said. "That's what matters most." The launch sequence began with a sound unlike any spacecraft launch in human history. Instead of the roar of conventional engines, the ship lifted off accompanied by music, a symphony that blended compositions from every human culture, playing from speakers that had no logical reason to function in the vacuum of space. As the small craft rose through Earth's atmosphere, alien detection systems registered its presence with automated disinterest. The ship's energy signature was so low that it barely registered as a threat. Their tactical computers classified it as a primitive reconnaissance vessel, hardly worth the expenditure of serious defensive measures. High above Earth's surface, Commander Zeth Kalar reviewed the tactical display showing the approaching human craft with amusement. "It appears the humans are attempting some sort of final symbolic gesture," he announced to the War Council. "A single small vessel with minimal weapons is approaching our fleet." General Morthak's mandibles clicked with what passed for laughter among his species. How pathetically typical. Even in defeat, they cling to their primitive beliefs about individual heroism. Shall we vaporize it immediately, or allow it to approach close enough for our scientists to study this final example of human delusion? Ancient Vorthis pulsed with sardonic amusement. Let it approach. The psychological data on human behavior during final desperation will be valuable for future conquests. Besides, what possible threat could a single primitive craft pose to our combined fleets? The three alien commanders settled back to observe what they expected to be humanity's final, futile gesture of defiance. Their defensive systems remained on automatic, programmed to eliminate any genuine threat, but calibrated to ignore vessels that posed no meaningful danger. They had no way of knowing that they were about to witness something their combined civilizations had never encountered, a human being who had become a living embodiment of every heroic story his species had ever told. Marcus felt the ship respond to his commands with an ease that defied explanation. The controls seemed to anticipate his intentions. The engines provided exactly the thrust needed, and the navigation systems guided him through space with a precision that should have been impossible given the craft's primitive design. "This is Control to Hero 1, came Sarah Chen's voice over the communication system. "You're approaching the outer perimeter of their defensive grid. Are you ready?" Marcus drew the sword from its sheath and laid it across the control panel. The weapon seemed to pulse with its own inner light, the symbols carved into its surface glowing with significance. "I've been ready my whole life for this moment. Every story I've ever heard, every myth I've ever believed, every legend passed down through human generations has been preparing me for this." The alien defensive grid activated as his ship crossed the perimeter, automated weapons systems swiveling to track the approaching craft. Energy cannons that could vaporize mountain ranges locked onto his position, waiting for targeting computers to determine the appropriate level of response. But the computers hesitated. The approaching vessel's energy signature was so minimal, its weapons so primitive, that the automated systems couldn't classify it as a legitimate threat. Defensive protocols had no instructions for dealing with a ship that carried weapons forged by hand rather than manufactured in automated factories. "Defensive systems show no significant response to the human vessel," reported Zeth Kalar's tactical officer. "The craft appears to be armed with primitive projectile weapons and what our sensors identify as metallic implements of unknown function." "Swords," General Morthok said with amusement. "The humans have armed their final warrior with archaic bladed weapons. How charmingly primitive." As Marcus's ship approached the alien fleet, something extraordinary began to happen. The stories and artifacts aboard his vessel seemed to take on a life of their own. The music playing from his speakers reached frequencies that shouldn't have been audible in space, yet somehow transmitted directly to the alien vessels. The sword in his hands grew warm, as if the legends carved into its surface were becoming real. "Control, I'm reading some unusual energy patterns," Marcus reported. "The weapons and artifacts are responding to proximity to the enemy fleet. It's as if they recognize what they were created for." Vasquez's excited voice came through the communication system. "The psychological resonance is working exactly as theorized. The aliens are experiencing cognitive dissonance as their logical minds try to process threats that exist outside their understanding of possible reality. On the alien command ships, confusion began to spread through the ranks. Instruments designed to analyze technological threats were returning impossible readings from the approaching human vessel. Energy detectors registered power sources that shouldn't exist, while cultural analysis programs struggled to categorize the bizarre mixture of primitive and advanced technologies. "Commander," reported a Zelthran sensor technician, "we're receiving some sort of transmission from the human craft. It appears to be music? And what our computers translate as narrative fiction?" Zeth Kalar's crystalline eyes flashed with irritation. "Explain. The human vessel's broadcasting the entire collected mythology of their species directly at our fleet. Our computers are struggling to process the data because it contains no tactical information, no strategic intelligence, just stories. But the stories were having an effect that none of the aliens could have anticipated. Across the three fleets, crew members found themselves accessing the human transmissions out of curiosity. As they did, something unprecedented began to happen. Species that had evolved beyond individual heroism began to remember what it felt like to believe in the possibility of personal courage changing the course of history. Marcus felt his ship accelerate beyond its theoretical maximum velocity as he approached the heart of the alien fleet. The sword in his hands now blazed with inner fire, and the armor he wore seemed to resonate with the accumulated faith of every human who had ever believed in heroes. "Target acquired," he announced to Earth's defenders, beginning final approach to the enemy command vessel. What happened next would be debated by military historians for generations. As Marcus Reed's small craft approached the massive alien mothership, every defensive system in the enemy fleet suddenly and simultaneously failed, not due to technological malfunction or sabotage, but because the targeting computers simply could not process the reality of what they were seeing. A human warrior, armed with legendary weapons, flying a ship powered by stories and faith, approaching their most heavily defended position with absolute confidence and victory. It was so far outside the aliens' experience of possible reality that their sophisticated military systems literally could not compute an appropriate response. The mythology was about to collide with the enemy command structure, and for the first time in their species' history, the aliens were about to learn that some human stories weren't fiction at all. The collision between mythology and reality began the moment Marcus Reed's ship pierced the energy shields surrounding the Zelthran command vessel. What should have been impossible became inevitable as ancient human stories overrode sophisticated alien technology through sheer force of narrative will. Commander Zethkalar watched in growing disbelief as his flagship's defensive systems not only failed to destroy the approaching human craft, but seemed to actively facilitate its approach. Energy barriers that could stop planetary bombardments parted like curtains, defensive turrets that could track objects moving at significant fractions of light speed lost, targeting locks on a vessel moving at conventional velocities. "Explain this malfunction immediately," Zethkalar commanded his technical staff, his forearms gesturing frantically at displays showing impossible readings. "Sir, there is no malfunction," reported his chief systems engineer, a multi-tentacled being whose species had perfected defensive technology across millennia. "All systems are functioning within normal parameters. The human vessel is simply not triggering threat response protocols." "That's impossible. The ship is clearly approaching with hostile intent." "Yes, sir, but our computers cannot classify primitive weapons as genuine threats to our technology. The defensive grid is programmed to respond to energy weapons, explosive devices, and advanced technological systems. It has no protocols for dealing with what our sensors identify as hand-forged metal implements." On the other command ships, similar scenes of confusion were playing out. General Mortak's compound eyes reflected growing agitation as his tactical displays showed the human craft moving through their formations as if the massive warships were merely empty space. "The human vessel is now broadcasting directly into our communication systems," reported his intelligence officer. "The transmissions appear to be historical accounts of individual warriors defeating superior forces through, the officer's mandibles clicked uncertainly, "through what humans call heroic determination. Ancient Vorthis, whose species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, found herself experiencing something entirely unprecedented: uncertainty." Her metallic form rippled with confusion as she accessed the human transmissions that were flooding the alien fleet's communication networks. "These stories follow consistent patterns," she announced to the War Council. "Individual beings facing impossible odds, armed with primitive weapons, achieving victory through personal courage and commitment to ideals greater than their own survival. The humans appear to believe these narratives represent actual historical events." "Primitive superstition," General Morthak insisted, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "Perhaps," Vorthis replied, "but observe the effect these superstitions are having on our military systems. Across the three fleets, something unprecedented was happening. Crew members found themselves unable to concentrate on their duties as human stories flooded their consciousness. Tales of David facing Goliath, of Arthur drawing Excalibur from the stone, of nameless soldiers holding impossible positions against overwhelming odds. The aliens had evolved beyond individual heroism, but the human narratives were awakening something they had forgotten: the memory of what it meant to believe that individual action could change the course of history. Marcus felt his ship respond to commands he wasn't giving, guided by something beyond conventional piloting skill. The sword at his side now blazed with light visible even through the viewport, and the artifacts surrounding him in the small cockpit seemed to pulse with accumulated significance. "Control, I'm inside their defensive perimeter," he reported to Earth. "The stories are working exactly as theorized. Their weapon systems can't target something that exists outside their logical framework for possible threats." "We're tracking your approach," came Sarah Chen's voice, tight with tension and hope. "The alien communications we're intercepting suggest complete confusion in their command structure. They can't understand why their technology isn't responding as programmed." "Because it's not programmed to fight legends," Marcus replied. The command ship loomed before him now, a massive construct of crystalline technology that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Yet as he approached, its surface seemed to shimmer with reflected light from his sword, as if the alien vessel was being illuminated by the power of human mythology itself. In the command bunker, deep beneath Earth's surface, Dr. Amanda Vasquez monitored the psychological readings from the alien fleet with growing excitement. "The resonance effect is exceeding all projections," she announced. "We're detecting massive cognitive disruption throughout their forces. They're experiencing something their evolved psychology has no framework to process." Thomas Wright stood beside displays showing the human stories being broadcast to the alien fleet. "For millions of years, they've built civilizations based on collective action and technological superiority. Individual heroism is literally incomprehensible to them, but the stories are forcing them to confront concepts their minds were never designed to handle: It's more than psychological warfare, said Dr. Rahman, studying the physics readings from Marcus's ship. The energy patterns around his vessel are defying conventional analysis. It's as if reality itself is being reshaped by the strength of narrative conviction. Marcus docked his small craft with the alien command ship using procedures that should have been impossible. The massive vessel's automated systems not only failed to prevent his boarding but actually assisted the process, opening docking bays and extending connection umbilicals as if welcoming an honored guest rather than an enemy combatant. He stepped onto the alien ship wearing armor that carried the weight of human history, bearing weapons that bridged the gap between mythology and reality. The sword in his hands hummed with power that had nothing to do with advanced technology and everything to do with accumulated human faith in the possibility of heroic triumph. The corridors of the Zelthran command ship stretched before him, their crystalline surfaces reflecting not just his physical presence, but somehow the stories that had shaped him. Ancient tales seemed to echo in the alien architecture, transforming sterile technological spaces into something resembling the mystical realms where legendary heroes had always traveled. Commander Zeth Kalar met him in the ship's primary control center, surrounded by his command staff and accompanied by holographic projections of General Morthak and Ancient Vorthus. The three alien commanders faced a single human warrior, and for the first time in their species' histories, they experienced something their sophisticated civilizations had evolved beyond: fear of individual determination. "This is impossible," Zeth Kalar said, his voice carrying harmonics of confusion and disbelief. "You are a single being armed with primitive implements. Our fleets number in the millions. Our technology spans galaxies. Our weapons can crack planets." Marcus raised the sword, and its light filled the alien command center with warmth that had nothing to do with thermal energy. "Your weapons can crack planets," he agreed. "But can they crack a story that humanity has been telling itself for thousands of years? Can they destroy the belief that individual courage can change the course of history?" General Morthak's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Belief cannot alter the fundamental laws of physics and warfare." "Can't it?" Marcus asked. He gestured to the tactical displays surrounding them, showing the current state of the war. 3 months ago, you said we would fall in 3 days. Every law of physics and warfare supported your prediction. Yet here we stand. Ancient Vorthus pulsed with increasing agitation. Your resistance has been admirable but ultimately futile. Individual heroism is an evolutionary dead end abandoned by all successful civilizations in favor of collective efficiency. Marcus smiled, and the expression carried the confidence of every human hero who had ever faced impossible odds. That's where you're wrong. Individual heroism isn't an evolutionary dead end. It's an evolutionary advantage that your species never developed, the ability of a single person to reshape reality through absolute commitment to victory. The alien commanders exchanged communications in frequencies beyond human hearing, but Marcus could sense their growing uncertainty. 3 galactic empires, with combined military might spanning millions of vessels and countless warriors, were being psychologically defeated by one human carrying weapons forged by hand and stories passed down through generations. "What do you want?" Zeth Kalar demanded. Marcus stepped forward, the sword's light seeming to push back the alien technology around him. "Unconditional surrender of all forces attacking Earth. Immediate withdrawal from human space. Recognition of humanity's right to exist free from interference." "Impossible." "We outnumber you millions to 1. Numbers don't matter when you're fighting someone who absolutely believes in victory," Marcus replied. "Every story humanity has ever told about heroes facing impossible odds ends the same way. The hero wins, not through superior force, but through superior will." The alien command center fell silent except for the gentle hum of advanced technology that suddenly seemed primitive compared to the power radiating from a single human with a sword and an absolute belief in the righteousness of his cause. What happened next would echo through galactic history for eons to come. 3 of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, facing a single human warrior armed with legendary weapons and mythological conviction, discovered that some forces in the universe are more powerful than technology, more enduring than military might, and more dangerous than any weapon ever devised. They discovered the power of a story that refuses to end with defeat. The moment that would reshape galactic civilization began not with the clash of weapons or the exchange of fire, but with something far more powerful. The moment when 3 alien species that had forgotten how to believe in individual heroism encountered a human who embodied every heroic story his people had ever told. Marcus Reed stood in the center of the alien command ship, surrounded by technology that could reshape stars, facing military commanders who had conquered half the galaxy. The sword in his hands blazed with light that seemed to illuminate not just the crystalline corridors, but the very nature of reality itself. "You speak of surrender. Commander Zethkalar said, his forearms spreading in a gesture that conveyed both authority and desperation. "But you are one, being against millions. Your demands are based on fantasy, not military reality." Marcus smiled with the confidence of every legendary hero who had ever faced impossible odds. Military reality? 3 months ago, military reality said humanity would fall in 3 days. Instead, we've held out long enough for our myths to become manifest. That's the power you never understood about human stories. They're not entertainment, they're blueprints for reshaping reality. The tactical displays around them showed the current state of the alien fleets. Across all 3 armadas, confusion and uncertainty were spreading like wildfire. Crew members found themselves unable to focus on their duties as human stories flooded their consciousness, forcing them to confront concepts their evolved psychology couldn't process. General Mortak's holographic presence flickered with agitation. "Individual heroism is an evolutionary impossibility. Successful civilizations advance beyond such primitive concepts." "Do they?" Marcus asked. He gestured to the displays showing the alien fleet's status reports. "Your crews are reading our stories and remembering something they thought they'd evolved beyond. The possibility that individual will can change the course of history. You've built civilizations so focused on collective efficiency that you've forgotten the power of personal conviction." Ancient Vorthis, whose species had existed for millions of years, found herself experiencing something unprecedented. Doubt about the fundamental assumptions that had guided her civilization for eons. "The psychological disruption among our forces is significant," she admitted reluctantly. "The human narratives are triggering response patterns we believed had been eliminated from our genetic memory." Dr. Vasquez's voice came through Marcus's communication implant, transmitted from the bunker deep beneath Earth's surface. "The resonance effect is spreading through all 3 fleets. We're detecting massive changes in alien behavior patterns. Crew members are abandoning their posts to access more human stories. Their command structures are breaking down as individuals start making independent decisions." "Because that's what our stories teach," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the alien command center and somehow broadcasting to every ship in the surrounding fleets. "That individual choice matters. That personal courage can overcome any obstacle. That heroes aren't born, they're made by the decisions they make when everything seems hopeless." The sword in his hands pulsed with increasing intensity, and the artifacts he carried seemed to resonate with the accumulated faith of every human who had ever believed in the possibility of heroic triumph. The very air around him shimmered with potential energy that defied every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. Thomas Wright's voice joined the transmission from Earth. "You've spent millions of years perfecting technology and military strategy, but you've forgotten the most powerful force in the universe. The willingness of an individual to sacrifice everything for something greater than themselves." Commander Zethkalar stared at the tactical displays with growing alarm. Across the 3 fleets, ships were beginning to break formation as their crews became consumed with human stories about individual heroism. Warriors who had been bred for collective action were suddenly making independent decisions, influenced by narratives about heroes who changed the course of history through personal courage. "This is mass psychological contamination," General Morthak declared. "The human narratives are acting like a virus, spreading concepts that undermine our fundamental military organization." "Exactly," Marcus said. "For 3 months you've been fighting the war you expected to fight. Now you're fighting the war we're designed to fight. The war where individual determination matters more than technological superiority." The light from Marcus's sword suddenly expanded, filling the entire command center with warmth that seemed to carry the essence of every heroic story humanity had ever told. The alien commanders found themselves experiencing emotions their species had evolved beyond: hope, courage, the belief that individual action could matter in the vast cosmos. Ancient Vorthis' metallic form rippled with unprecedented confusion. "The energy readings from your weapons are impossible. They're generating power outputs that exceed our understanding of physical law." "That's because they're not powered by physics," Marcus explained. "They're powered by something your civilizations abandoned long ago. The absolute faith that right can triumph over might, that courage can overcome any obstacle, that individuals can reshape reality through force of will." The communication systems throughout the alien fleets crackled with reports of unprecedented events. Across thousands of ships, crew members were abandoning their assigned duties to gather around communication screens, consuming human stories with fascination and growing understanding. Warriors who had never imagined acting independently were beginning to question their orders. Collective military discipline was dissolving as individuals rediscovered the concept of personal heroism. Sarah Chen's voice joined the transmission from Earth's command bunker. Every culture in human history has told the same story. When everything seems hopeless, when defeat appears certain, heroes emerge to change the course of history. You've been fighting our military forces.
Now you're fighting our imagination.
Commander Zethkalar's crystalline eyes reflected the growing chaos on his tactical displays. Our fleets are experiencing systematic breakdown of command authority. Individual crew members are making independent decisions based on stories about fictional characters. Are they fictional? Marcus asked. He raised the sword above his head, and its light seemed to reach beyond the physical boundaries of the command ship, touching every vessel in the surrounding armadas. Or are they templates for what any individual can become when survival demands heroism? The answer came in the form of something that had never happened in the history of galactic warfare. Across the 3 alien fleets, individual crew members began refusing their orders, not due to mutiny or rebellion, but because human stories had awakened something in them that their evolutionary conditioning had suppressed. The understanding that individual conscience could matter more than collective authority. On the Korvac vessels, insectoid warriors who had been bred for unquestioning obedience began making independent moral decisions. On the Vorthak ships, ancient beings who had followed collective wisdom for eons started questioning whether military victory justified the destruction of a species that could create such powerful stories about heroism and hope. Dr. Vasquez's excited voice reached Marcus through his communication implant. The cascade effect has exceeded all projections. Individual aliens throughout their fleets are accessing human literature, art, and music. They're experiencing cultural concepts their species evolved beyond millions of years ago. What are they experiencing? Marcus asked, though he could already sense the answer in the changing atmosphere of the alien command center. Wonder, Thomas Wright replied from Earth. Curiosity. The belief that individual life has meaning beyond collective efficiency. They're remembering what it feels like to believe in heroes. General Morthak's holographic presence flickered with increasing instability as his own ship experienced breakdown of military discipline. This is impossible. Individual heroism cannot overcome organized military might. Then explain this, Marcus said, gesturing to the tactical displays that showed the current state of the 3 alien fleets. Ships were breaking formation, crews were refusing orders, and across millions of vessels, sophisticated military organization was dissolving as individuals rediscovered the power of personal choice. Ancient Vortes pulsed with something that might have been admiration. Your species has achieved something we believed impossible, she said slowly. You've weaponized imagination itself. Your stories are acting as a psychological virus that's spreading the concept of individual heroism through our collective consciousness. Marcus stepped forward, the sword's light now filling the entire command center with warmth that carried the essence of every human story about triumph over impossible odds. It's not a virus, it's a reminder. Every species in the galaxy once had individuals who believed they could change the course of history through personal courage. You've just forgotten how to access that power. The moment of decision arrived with the sound of silence. Throughout the 3 alien fleets, the constant chatter of military communications suddenly stopped. Millions of individual beings across thousands of ships simultaneously came to the same realization that the war they were fighting was wrong, not because of tactical considerations, but because the species they were trying to destroy had taught them to remember what heroism meant. Commander Zethkalar looked at his tactical displays, then at the human warrior standing before him carrying weapons that blazed with the accumulated faith of an entire civilization. What happens if we surrender? Marcus lowered the sword, though its light continued to fill the alien command center. You go home. You remember what your species was like before you forgot how to believe in heroes. And you tell the galaxy that humanity taught you something you thought you'd evolved beyond, that individual courage can reshape reality itself. The formal surrender came not as a military defeat, but as a moment of galactic awakening. 3 of the most advanced civilizations in the universe facing a single human warrior armed with legendary weapons and mythological conviction recognized that they had encountered something more powerful than technology or military might. The willingness of an individual to become the hero that every great story promised was possible. As the alien fleets began their withdrawal from Earth's solar system, Marcus Reed stood in the command center of a vessel that had once threatened his homeworld, watching displays that showed millions of former enemies accessing human stories with wonder and growing understanding. Mission accomplished. The aliens are withdrawing, and they're taking our stories with them. What about you? Sarah Chen asked from Earth. Marcus smiled as he looked out at the stars. where alien vessels were broadcasting human myths and legends to each other with the enthusiasm of beings who had rediscovered wonder. I'm coming home. But first, I think I'll spend some time teaching our former enemies about the stories we haven't shared with them yet. The war was over. Humanity had won not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through something the aliens had never encountered: the power of stories that refuse to accept defeat, the strength of myths that become reality when individuals believe in them strongly enough. And across the galaxy, 3 alien civilizations began the long journey back to something they thought they had evolved beyond: the understanding that individual heroism could change the universe, one story at a time.